Doing gets it done. Brought to you by Wells Fargo Bank, the bank of doing.
This is Alana, an artisan businesswoman who's going to share how she turned her passion into a company and then scaled it.
The first thing you can probably do is just pause for a moment, figure out what you need to do, and kind of go from there. The second thing to do is be transparent with your audience. Third and final thing, know your resources. There's so many people around you who can help, and it's just taking the time to understand how and trusting in that process.
When you first started, did you imagine that you would be here?
Gosh, I think at the beginning, I just hoped that one day I would have a gallery show. That was the most for me. If I could just live off of my artwork, that I would be fine with it. That time, I was still working full time. And so I would often find myself kind of driving to work and I'd just be, looking out the window. I'd have like a fleeting thought of something I wanted to create. And, by the time I got home, I was too tired. Once we were ready to move back to Texas, I kind of was like, I could either stay working or I could just go full time. So my husband was like, just start making artwork. Don't go back to work, I got it. So I got an iPad, taught myself how to draw, and just kind of started working from there.
All right, she pursued her passion. How did she turn that into a business?
So it was very slow at first. Mostly family members, friends, close people I knew who were purchasing from me. So it was very slow until the George Floyd event that had happened. I wanted to put together a fundraiser, and then I posted a video that I wasn't going to post, and it went viral. It went like crazy viral. From that, people just gradually started buying the other work that I had on sale as well. So just one day I'm sitting there looking at my computer and I'm just, the orders are coming in. I've got 300 plus orders to go through. I was handwriting every single order that would come in, and I really had to pivot my business at that point.
Okay, so sales increased unexpectedly. How did she scale to meet demand?
I definitely never saw myself giving business advice to anyone, but it's really cool. I think there's some fun things that I've learned and I'm happy to share it. So when you're scaling your business, you can't really just do the same things you've been doing before. You kind of need to stop doing what you were doing before and you need to figure out a new way. For me, honestly, the pause, I went to the business side of things, made sure everything was kind of connected on the back end. I ended up setting up an account for this company called ShipStation, and I was able to automate all of my orders directly from my website, getting my shipping in order, focused on reaching out to new wholesale clients and getting prepped on the back end so that it was ready when I needed to open up.
Okay, that's a pretty bold move, pausing your business to prepare for growth. How do you make sure your customers are okay with that?
As a consumer, I think the most appreciate transparency. If you're behind on something, you just tell me. I just want to know, So I feel like I'd like to offer that same service, if you will. Probably not the right word, but luckily I've been very blessed with my customer base. So when I was like, I need a break, everyone was like, oh girl, take a break. It's no problem. We'll be here when you get back. And so I just focused on just making artwork. And luckily everyone stood by me and waited for me to come back.
All right, so customers respond well to transparency. Last question. What do you do if you don't have the knowledge to make it at the next level?
Leaning on the people around you is just so important. A friend of mine who finds joy in doing people's taxes, which I don't understand. You aren't going to know everything. And I think that's a strength in knowing that you don't know everything. And so when you're able to lean on other people, it really frees up so much of your time. You're able to worry about the creative side of what you're doing, if that's what you would like to do. And it's just all about trusting your resources. I think my business is better for it, to be perfectly honest.
The first step I would tell a prospective small business owner is you've got to create a business plan. You've got this product or you've got this service that you're then looking to monetize. How are you going to do that? And it sounds really simple, but the first step is really creating a business plan. And it could be daunting, you're staring at a piece of paper, you've got this idea, how are you going to do it? And so, what I really recommend is Wells Fargo's got some tools for small businesses to go online, and they're free planning resources. And one of the tools that they have is a step-by-step instruction where you can go and you can say, okay, this is what I want to do. And you really have to think about all the things that go into starting a small business. What's the market? What's your value proposition? How are you going to finance this? What people do you need around you? All the kinds of, they sound very basic, but when you put it together, this is going to be your written document that you then take to hire employees, to get capital, to get loans, to get funding, everything you need to basically be successful with a small business. The business plan is basically your step-by-step analysis on what you're going to do to start this business. So you've got this product, let's say you want to launch swimwear, for example. How are you going to take this idea of a swimsuit and how are you going to make money doing it? And so your business plan is saying, okay, I've got this swimsuit, here's the target market, here is who I'm gearing this product towards. Maybe it's people that gave birth and now have, they want swimming bathing suits. Maybe it's the tweens. What is your target market? And then how are you going to position yourself within that space? And so it's just really what and your value proposition. What are you bringing to a customer set that doesn't already exist in the world? How are you going to differentiate your product? Because that's the reason people are going to buy your product. If you ask me, the 3 people that you should surround yourself when you're starting a business are an attorney. It can help you think about what type of business structure would you like to be. Would you like to be an S Corp, a C Corp? All these things that aren't typical, but they affect tax planning, guarantees, things like that. The second person is always like a tax planner, tax specialist. That's a really important piece about how you're going to have to pay for business expenses early on. And then the third piece is probably a banker. And bankers can really help you strategize in tandem with attorneys to come up with a business plan. So if you're in an underserved community, that's actually a really important piece of the financial ecosystem that the government and banks are trying to tackle. There are lenders called Community Development Financial Institutions. They're called CDFIs. Many people have not heard about these, but they're lenders that have been set up specifically to advise people in underserved communities about technical assistance that they can offer, lending options that they can offer. And one of the cool things that has been developed is a tool called the Small Business Resource Navigator. And it's a tool that was developed in conjunction with the Community Reinvestment Fund. It's an online portal that you can go into, and as a small business owner, you can say, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't have the technical expertise. I don't know where I'm going to get my funding from. What can I do? And so through this portal, you fill out, a small questionnaire, and you're able to get connected with these lenders. And just to back up a little bit, CDFIs, they're a really important part of the financial ecosystem. Like I said, when you're a small business owner, you don't necessarily have 3 years of historical statements. It's hard to get bank loans. You just don't have the same resources that people that have been in, maybe they're in metropolitan areas, they've got access to resources. And so the CDFIs are what have been put there to provide fair and consistent lending to these underserved communities. And I think since 2012, we've been able to connect about 2,000 businesses with these CDFIs. So there's a ton of resources out there for these underserved communities. The most important thing to think about when you're starting a business is every business has startup costs. And so you're going to have to pay for rent, you're going to have to pay for equipment, maybe you have to buy a building, there's supplies. Every business has that. But it's really, how are you going to pay for the maintenance things? How are you going to pay salaries? How are you going to pay for stuff along the way until you can get that first piece product sold, till the revenue comes in. But even once you have the revenue, that doesn't necessarily mean you've got cash flow. You then got to collect the receivables. So there's just a long cycle depending on what the business is, what the product is. So where are you going to get the capital to do that? So one of the initial steps is what type of business, I alluded to this a little bit before, but what type of business are you going to set up? Are you going to be an S Corp? Are you going to be a C Corp? Are you going to be a sole proprietor? There's so many ramifications to that. And so that in my opinion, is really the first step. The second one is also separating out your personal from your business finances. When you have to pay taxes, you do it on a quarterly basis. Do you have enough money set aside? You really need to understand what are the business's income and expenses. And then you have to be able to create a financial statement, financial statements, balance sheet, income statement, statement of cash flow. So you really have to get support from an expert to bring in to make sure that you've got the capability to find financing ultimately. For those people that think this might be overwhelming, it's done all the time. And my first piece of advice would really be go find a local bank, go find a local business banker and connect with them. There's thousands and thousands of businesses that get formed every day and people going through it every day. And as I alluded to before, there's tons of resources online that can help you in a step-by-step method. The most critical piece on the financing side is how are you going to finance this business? There's a myriad of different options out there. You can go to friends and family, there's crowdfunding, there's venture capitalists, there's traditional banks, but what actually works for you? And I think that that's a very important question to ask yourself. And so, my recommendation is just to partner with a banker really early and learn the pros and cons about what you need to get financing in each capacity.
Your business idea is going to require capital to get it off the ground. You might be asking yourself, how the hell do I start?
Yeah, how do you start? We asked Josh, the CEO of a climate technology company, that question.
I wish I knew these 3 things before I raised my first $1 million. Have a strategy, build investor FOMO, and treat investors like people. I did exactly 0 of that when I was raising my first round.
How would you explain to a 6th grader what Noya does?
Noya develops machines that pull gases out of the air that are currently heating the planet up to a very scary level.
Wow. Dude, that was like, did someone ask you that question?
No, I just came up with that. I remember having this clear thought about how we got to help the trees out. And if climate change is caused by there being too much of one thing in the atmosphere, then why can't we develop a way to pull that thing out of the atmosphere? In our approach, we retrofit existing pieces of industrial equipment like cooling towers and turn them into carbon vacuums.
That sounds expensive. How'd he get the money?
So which of the co-founders had money? Neither of us had money. From the very beginning, we knew we were going to need a good amount of capital to build this technology. I volunteered to ultimately chase after investors and try to raise our first round of capital. I was like a chicken running around with a head cut off, just squawking at people trying to say, hey, do you have money? Do you want to invest? It was a hard time. We probably got told no about 50 times before we got told yes for the first time. The conversation with our first investor was great. And at the end of the call, they said, great, let's schedule another call and we'll send you some questions in between for us to discuss then. I was like, cool, questions, I can do that. Sounds great. But when we were asked for scientific literature to support what we were doing and some deep amount of analysis, well, we had to make all that up.
Before we get into the lesson, how do you know when you're ready to talk to investors?
So you need proof that people want what you're building, the knowledge that what you're building actually works to solve the problem that this first group has, and some idea of what your financial structure is and how you're going to make money. Before you reach out to investors, know what investors you're going to reach out to. Make a list, but I wouldn't reach out to anybody on that list until I was ready to reach out to all of them, and then I would reach out to all of them at the same time. The second thing I would make sure that I would do is figure out ways to play investors off of each other and create this incredibly powerful FOMO effect.
What does FOMO have to do with fundraising?
Without communicating that people are investing in your round, it's hard to maintain urgency in the eyes of investors. And then the third thing is keep in mind that investors are really just people. They're not this cold-hearted, machine of a firm that's looking to extract value. They're just people too. And so we did these 3 things in the second round that we raised, and it went way better, went way smoother, went way faster.
Noya's been around for about 2 years and so far has raised $1.2 million.
We are still in early innings. We have been able to prove our technology at a small scale. We've been able to get some amazing early partners, and we've been able to partner with some great investors as well. We are definitely in a much better place now than we were then, and I would not take any of it back despite some of the bumps and twists that we've had along the way.
In order to get a yes on a loan, it really depends on, again, what type of loan you're trying to get. It's really important to have a good plan in place. We talked about the business plan a little bit. That is going to be the fundamental tool you need. No matter where you go, what you do, people lend to people. And as a lender myself, we're not as focused on the return of our capital at our investment into as we are a return of our capital. So we want to make sure that whatever you're doing, whatever you're planning for, you're able to pay us back. And so a lot of that will be around, did you do a budget? Have you created a financial plan? Who are the people that you've surrounded yourself with? And have you saved for a rainy day? I think that's ultimately the biggest question for a lender is, do you have enough capital in the business to get you to the point where you've got cash flow coming in to repay the debt? Initially, when you're a small business, you're going to be judged by your credit rating, and that's how banks determine your credit worthiness. It's basically a numerical representation to us. And most people know this as the FICO score. And so typically it's between 300 to 850. That's the range of the FICO score. The higher your FICO score, the more creditworthy you are. The lower your FICO score, the less creditworthy you are. So really spending a lot of time up front making sure your FICO score looks good. Now, 65% of your FICO score is split between your payment history and what your balances are with your credit. And so that's really where I would focus. Make sure you pay your bills on time. Make sure you make the minimum payment at a bare minimum. And then the rule of thumb on how much you should be borrowing on your lines is typically about 30%. So if you have a $10,000 line, you don't want to have $10,000 that you owe on a consistent basis. Maintaining adequate financial statements is probably the most important thing any small business owner is going to do. So if you don't know how to do it, my biggest recommendation is to hire someone, whether it's a part-time CFO, a temporary accountant, someone to help you get your books and records in order. You really need to understand, it's very important to understand revenue is very different than cash flow. So I'm going to go back to my swimsuit example. You can sell a swimsuit to Nordstrom's, but if Nordstrom's doesn't pay you back for that swimsuit, you don't have the cash flow. So your books and records really need to have your accounts receivable, your inventory, your accounts payable, all of that stuff detailed out so that you can weekly make sure you're collecting on the cash and you've got the ability to then pay your suppliers. And I think that's where a lot of businesses get into challenges. Entrepreneurs are amazing because they've got these amazing ideas, and I've been doing this for 25 years, so I get to see a lot of that. You also get to see a lot of the challenges, you get to see a lot of the things that people don't account for, and most of the time it comes down to the fact that they don't have enough capital for a rainy day. And you can predict, for seasonality, things like that, going back to the swimsuit example, you collect all your cash in a 2 to 3 month period, but then you're making the swimsuits, you're paying all these people for 9 months out of the year, you don't collect any cash. How do you bridge that gap? And so if I had a product or a service that I thought I could monetize, I would try it.
Melody was 19 and had applied for admission to the California Culinary Academy. She wanted to learn how to cook so she could open her own restaurant, like her father before her. But now, her mother was on the phone with the school's admissions office. Despite that rejection, in 2011, Melody and her husband Russ set out to open their own restaurant in San Francisco. They would make delicious food while providing the types of opportunities for deaf professionals that both Melody and Russ had been denied. But from raising the money she needed to get started to surviving a slowdown in sales, Melody would face a crush of challenges as a first-time restaurateur. But Melody's husband, Russ, a cautious, business-minded person, well, despite that risk, Melody and Russ decided to start a fully deaf-owned and operated restaurant together. They would serve authentic Neapolitan-style pizza. Melody got the loan she needed. She had 5 years to make a profit and pay it back. But then, the honeymoon period ended as competition from new restaurants lured customers away. To keep her doors open, Melody needed to bring in more revenue, fast. But with declining sales at the restaurant, Melody had to get creative. Yeah, she took on a wedding for her first catering experiment. That's bold. Catering suddenly seemed like a viable additional revenue stream. But to capture the opportunity, they needed a bigger oven. They found one in a food truck modeled after the iconic San Francisco cable car. Yup, Florida. So Russ and Melody drove it cross-country themselves and made a dope road trip out of it. The brick-and-mortar restaurant supported the catering operation, whose revenues in turn supported the restaurant. After 7 years of successfully running their business, the changing circumstances of Melody's life made it necessary for her to leave the restaurant behind. She was disappointed, but sold the restaurant and catering business to a nonprofit that supports deaf professionals. And those loans? She paid them all off. But Melody hasn't given up on entrepreneurship, nor working with family.
So this is our San Francisco collection. We have them in 2 colors. San Francisco is known for being cloudy and foggy, so we decided to go with fog gray. What are the bags made out of?
It's a post-consumer material.
Okay, cool, because we are a sustainable clothing company, so we're definitely interested in using recycled materials.
Melody and Tasha's sustainable fashion company is facing challenges, like all businesses do, but they find meaning in building something that's theirs.
Challenges for startup businesses is always, to me, the first and foremost, how are you going to finance your idea? And are you thinking through all the things that you should be thinking about? Nobody can plan for a pandemic. Nobody can plan for some of the things that you don't know, a terrorist attack, those are things. But you can plan for the rainy days. You can plan for a bad season. You can plan for a recession. You can plan for things. And I think oftentimes small business owners don't do that. They don't plan for that. Riding the waves of uncertainty in economic times is just simply getting back to planning, making sure that you've got enough capital available, and connecting with whoever your lender or your capital providers be, so that everybody has a backup plan. If things aren't going the way that you want them to be and you need more capital, does your investor have more capital? Is the bank going to treat you the way that you need to be treated? There's so many tools and services that all banks offer, and are you taking advantage of them? Are you taking advantage of the treasury management tools that banks have? Are you automating things? Are you using AI where you can? There's so many tools that you can use that lower your costs, so that when you go through these economic uncertainties, you're in a good position. In terms of words of wisdom, I would just say, and I'm not the one that created this, but I always remember that all businesses start small. You have to really plan, and you never know where a rainy day is going to come from. To me, if you can account for that, you're going to be successful.
Not all business ideas require fundraising, but either way, entrepreneurship requires work. Is it worth it?
There are many reasons that it's worth it to take a step towards your dream idea. You will just grow so much as an individual. Being a founder is like compressing a normal person's workload into like a much smaller amount of space and forcing everything else to kind of squeeze out of the edges. And I think one of the big joys of pursuing a dream is that whether or not you reach the dream, you're able to become a better person through it. The second reason to come to mind is that you might just reach your dream. If you have an idea that you're thinking about, strongly consider doing it.
Entrepreneurship has taught me that I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was, that I can learn anything that I want to learn, and that I've got really great people around me supporting me.